Okay, hi everyone. Building custom directives in Angular is pretty tricky. So in this video I'm going to go over the role that restrict plays in directives within AngularJS. So I'm going to do my best to keep the app simple so it's as easy as possible for you all to see what's going on. This is my first video, so please bear with me. First of all, if you are following along, make sure that you've got the files that you need. We're only going to be using 3 files total in this video. You've got your index, I've got app.js here with my module, and JavaScript file that I've named directives. Make sure that you've got ng-app here. And also make sure that you have the CDN for Angular, then your app, then the directives. So I will include the Angular CDN in the description for this video. Okay, for the sake of simplicity, again, no controllers, no services. We're also steering away from routing in this exercise, and again, that's just to make it as transparent as possible. So, when we build our directive here, basically the directive is actually a factory, and you're returning all of these options that pretty much tell Angular's HTML compiler how to deal with each directive when it's compiling. So we're not going to be looking at most of these. We're only going to be using template and restrict today. So let's get rid of this whole mess. We'll just start from scratch. Say app.directive. Give your directive a name. We're going to call this directive Mr. Fancy. Okay, and we're returning an object. First of all, let's restrict here. And we're going to give it the value of E here. Now you have 3 options. You have E, A, and C. We're going to go through each one of those in a little bit more detail. It's worth noting that without it specified, it automatically defaults to AE. And we'll be taking a look at that in a moment as well. So let's just do E here. And for a template, let's see here. Let's make an H1 so it's easy to see in our view over here. And it's just going to say Mr. Fancy in the hizzy. Okay. So E stands for element, and we're going to need to put it in our index here the same way we would any other HTML element. So you might be thinking, since you named it this way, that this is how we'll do that. However, that is not the case. So you have to define your directive in camel case. If you give it a capital letter to begin with, it usually gives me an error. Let's see, it's thinking about it. Okay, yeah, so we've got an error here that is going to tell us that we can't have a capital letter. So basically, you're going to put it in camel case in your JS, but in your HTML it needs to be the same thing, but in snake case. So let's see what we have here now. Oh, we still haven't changed that back to lowercase m. Okay, and we've got Mr. Fancy in the hizzy here. So again, E, we're going to use it as an HTML element. That's what it stands for. Another thing to make note of here is that you can do it as a self-closing element, but I would not. And we'll go over why in a little bit when we do another directive here. So see, that's still working. We're not going to do it like that, though. Okay, so let's make another directive. A lot of times when you see an Angular video on YouTube or something like that, people are, or the person giving the instruction is basically doing everything in one JS file. Typically that drives me crazy, but for the sake of being able to see everything that's going on here, we're just going to go ahead and do that anyway. We're going to put all our directives in this directives.js file here. So let's make a Ms. Fancy. Instead of E, we're going to go with A. A stands for attribute here. That's attribute. And let's make it say something else so we can actually tell if she's showing up. We'll have Ms. Fancy in the his alert son. Okay, good. So let's just put this down here, and let's just try changing this to Ms. Fancy. Now, as I'm sure you have guessed, it's not going to work because this format only works when we have restrict set to E for element. So A is attribute. We're going to comment this out. And let's just do a div here. Okay. And this is how we're going to use the Ms. Fancy directive. Okay. Let's reload here. So now we've got Mr. Fancy in the hizzy, as well as Ms. Fancy in the hislert son, which is great. Let's see here. Anything else to go over with A? Okay, yeah. Let's just look at this now. So before I said if you don't specify a property for restrict, it will default to something like this, AE or EA. It doesn't really matter what order you put them in, but I'm going to show you how if we don't specify, we can get away with Ms. Fancy here as an element on line 10 and as an attribute in line 11. Okay, now she's here twice, just like we were expecting. So let's get rid of this, though. We're going to put this restriction back on. And there's one last value that you can give to restrict. We're going to make another directive here. Okay, is this one? No, sorry. Let's copy Ms. Fancy. Again, note, even though it's not an element and it's just an attribute, you still have to convert your camel case here to snake case over here in the index. So obviously we're going to have to give this a different name. We've kind of got the fancies building a little family here. Let's make Baby Mick Fancy Buns. Okay, we're going to make this C. C stands for class. And here, little Baby Fancy just says holla. Okay, very good. And I won't waste your time showing you that it doesn't work in these formats above. Basically, you're going to pass it in as a class. So again, we're going to have to do snake case. So it's going to be Baby Mick Fancy Buns. Okay. And hopefully that gives us what we're hoping for here. Lots of hope. Okay, there we go. So we're all in the hizzy together, holla, families, all great together. So those are the three options for restrict when you're building an Angular directive. Again, there are a lot of other complicated choices that you can include here, but I just wanted to show you restrict. Okay, and let's just for the heck of it here, you know what, let's make another directive. We're going to give this family, we're going to give them a pet named mammalCat. And let's see here, cat friend keeps it real. Okay. And right here, we're going to give it A, C, and E. So you should be able to use the mammalCat directive as an element, as a class, or as an as an attribute, a class, or an element. So first of all, let's do it as an element. So we've got mammalCat, again, snake case, and then we're going to do it as an attribute. Div mammalCat. And we're going to also do it as a class. So div mammal, oh sorry, I'm just copying that. Div class equals mammalCat. And hopefully we've got that coming through now. Okay, and cat friend keeps it real. So notice with the element, you're not quite as flexible as, say, with the attribute in some ways. So for instance, we could add a button. We don't need this. We're just going to say Ms. Fancy. Give that button the class of Ms. Fancy, and we should also be able to do the same thing with mammalCat. And we should also be able to do the same thing with mammalCat, but as a class. reloading, and you can see we've got buttons now that are being influenced by our directives. So yeah, that's basically it. Hopefully this was at least a little bit helpful for you, or maybe just a decent review. I'm including a link to the official docs for directives in the description. And like I said, I'm planning on making some more videos like this. So until then, I guess keep it real like